August 6th, 1945, there's a pilot who witnessed one of history's darkest moments. But how can the events of that day change a person's soul forever? This man's story shows that the end of the war was actually the beginning of a new battle for him. If you have similar stories, send them to the email address in the description.
I remember that morning every day I live. August 6th, 1945. My name is Robert Mitchell, but everyone calls me Bobby. I was 24 years old and serving as a lieutenant in the United States Air Force. That day was the beginning of the longest day of my life. I woke up early in the morning at our base on Tinian Island. We had been stationed here since November, and it had become routine every day. But that morning was different. There was tension in the air, and everyone was quietly making their preparations. I was average height, with brown hair cut short in military style. The youthful determination I always carried in my green eyes was even more pronounced that morning. My hands were ready to grasp the control panel with the experience of countless flight hours. I sat in the breakfast tent, watching the steam from my coffee cup. I could see the same tension in the faces of my friends sitting next to me. Our commander had told us there was a special mission, but we didn't know the details yet. He only mentioned the super fortress called Enola Gay and said we would be doing escort duty for her. Later in the morning, we were called to the briefing room. The cold room with concrete walls was covered with military maps and technical drawings. There were 15 of us in the room, and we were all waiting silently. We sat on metal chairs, examining the files in our hands. The morning light filtering through the window made dust particles dance in the air. When Commander Colonel Tibbets entered, we stood up. He was a tall man with an authoritative posture. His gray hair was a mark of military discipline, and determination could be read in his blue eyes. When he placed the file in his hand on the table, the silence in the room deepened. He told us that we had been given a special mission, that this mission could end the war. He spoke with both pride and gravity in his voice. Our target was the city of Hiroshima. The photograph shown to us during the briefing stuck in my mind. Aerial images of Hiroshima showed every detail of the city. Houses by the river, temples, schools, hospitals. Each was marked as a target point. As I walked toward my plane, I thought about my home in Texas. In our small town north of Dallas, my wife Mary was waiting for me. Mary, whose blonde hair sparkled in the sunlight and whose blue eyes were as deep as the ocean. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall, with a graceful posture and always smiling with pink lipstick. In the 3 years since we married, I had never lied to her. But this time was different. I couldn't tell her about this mission. In my letters, I only wrote about routine flights. Actually, the content of the letter I wrote to her that morning was still on my mind. My dear Mary, my duty here will be over soon. When autumn comes, we will sit together on our little farm in Texas and drink coffee on the porch. I miss you very much and think of you every day. I will be home soon. I had felt my pen trembling in my hand as I wrote this letter. It was as if I had a bad feeling inside, that something was going to go wrong. When I stood in front of my plane, I could hear the sound of the engines. Our Liberator bomber gleamed silver in the morning sun. This giant machine with a wingspan of 33 meters would make history today. The light filtering through the cockpit windows danced on the control panel. We took off at 6:30. I was flying behind Enola Gay and could see her metallic body gleaming in the sunlight. Flying over the Pacific Ocean, I watched the endless blue waters below. As we passed through the clouds, my plane's shadow disappeared and reappeared on the sea surface. 2 hours later, we approached the Japanese coast. Below, islands covered with greenery could be seen. Hiroshima City looked peaceful from a distance. It was early morning and the city was just beginning to wake up. Among the streets were small buildings, traditional Japanese temples, and wooden houses. Shops lined along the main street were waiting for the day's first customers. After listening to the final instructions from the radio, we took position. As Enola Gay approached the bomb drop point, I was protecting her right wing. I felt my heartbeat accelerating. My hands gripped the control stick tightly, and my eyes constantly scanned the city below. At exactly 8:15, the bomb was dropped. At first, everything seemed normal. I could see it falling downward like a small dot. Then Enola Gay turned sharply to the right, and we followed. I heard the commander's voice on the radio, telling everyone to put on their glasses. 43 seconds later, my world changed. First came the light. A light 1,000 times brighter than the sun. Even with glasses on, I had to close my eyes. Then came the sound, a noise that burst my eardrums. My plane shook violently, and for a moment, I wasn't sure I could control it. When I opened my eyes, a giant mushroom cloud was rising below. This terrible sight, growing within orange, red, and yellow flames, was rising toward the sky. The city of Hiroshima was no longer there. In its place were only smoke, fire, and destruction. At that moment, I realized that I had witnessed not just a bomb, but a weapon that ended the lives of thousands of people. Below were children, women, elderly people, young people. Fathers drinking morning coffee, students preparing for school, mothers feeding their babies. They had all vanished in an instant. Once this thought settled in my mind, I felt nauseous. I could no longer look down from my plane's window. I tried to look at the sky, but that mushroom cloud seemed to have spread everywhere. The smell of smoke hanging in the air seemed to reach my nose. I was having trouble breathing. When I looked at my friend's plane flying to my right, I could see that he was experiencing the same shock. He was looking at me through the cockpit window and shaking his head. We were both thinking the same thing. What have we done? The return journey lasted like an eternity. No one was talking on the radio. I was left alone with just the monotonous sound of the engines and my own thoughts. Returning to Tinian, I tried to think that this mission would end the war. Maybe we had saved the lives of thousands of American soldiers. Maybe this was the right thing to do. But the voice inside me was telling me other things. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mushroom cloud. The brightness of that light seemed to remain in my retinas. I heard the sounds of Hiroshima in my dreams. The screams of people, the smell of burning air, the weight of silence. After returning to base, we had a debriefing. The commander said the mission was successful. They said the war would end soon and we would go home. But I was no longer the same Bobby. My friends who looked into my eyes understood this too. We had all changed. That night, lying in my tent, I thought about what to write to Mary. How would I tell her what I had experienced? Could I write, "Darling, today I witnessed history's greatest weapon and maybe saw the beginning of humanity's end"? No, I only told her about my well-being and wrote that I would be home soon. The following days became even more difficult. Every morning when I woke up, I felt like I could hear the sound of that explosion. I sat in my tent, examining my hands. I thought about how these hands had held that control stick, how they had played a role in that mission. There was no blood on my fingers, but I felt as dirty as my hands. When talking with my friends at Tinian, I could see that we had all changed. Tommy, who used to joke around all the time, was now quiet. Mike was constantly looking at his photographs and saying he missed his family. Jim went outside to smoke at night and watch the stars for hours. We were all trying to cope in different ways, but none of us could easily get out from under this burden. On August 9th, we learned that a second bomb had been dropped on Nagasaki too. When this news came, I was sitting in our cafeteria. The voice from the radio announced that the second city had also been destroyed. At that moment, I dropped my fork and ran outside. I felt like I was going to vomit. On August 15th, Japan surrendered and the war officially ended. Everyone was celebrating, but I couldn't celebrate. What a great price humanity had paid to end the war. In September, I returned to the United States. When I set foot in San Francisco Harbor, Mary was waiting for me. Her yellow dress was fluttering in the wind, and there were tears in her eyes. I ran to her and hugged her. But even while hugging, those images wouldn't leave my mind. After returning to Dallas, I tried to get used to normal life. Our house was in a quiet neighborhood north of the city. It was a 2-story house painted white with a small garden. The roses Mary had planted were spreading fragrance in the garden, and when we sat on the porch in the evenings, these beautiful scents reached our noses. But I could no longer notice these beauties. Mary was very patient with me. I watched her making coffee in the kitchen every morning. Her blonde hair fell to her shoulders, and her blue apron dress suited her very well. She would smile at me and say, "Good morning, darling," every morning. But my eyes no longer had that old sparkle. She saw that I couldn't sleep at night, that I woke up screaming. One night I had heard the screams from Hiroshima in my dream and woke up shouting, "No, don't drop the bomb." Mary had shaken me and woken me up. There was worry in her eyes. "What happened, Bobby? Are you having a nightmare?" she had said. I wanted to tell her what I had experienced, but I couldn't tell her. This secret was a burden that my friends and I had to carry. Every morning when reading newspapers, news about reconstruction in Japan caught my eye. I read about how Hiroshima and Nagasaki were being rebuilt, how people were trying to continue their lives. My hands trembled when reading these news stories. In November, I started working at the local newspaper. I started writing war stories, but I never wrote about that day. With each passing day, those memories became heavier. Mary and I got married at the beginning of 1946. Even on our wedding day, Hiroshima was on my mind. Years passed and we had children, 2 sons and a daughter. When they asked me what their father had done in the war, I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to tell them that I was a hero, but I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a murderer. When I turned 50, I finally told Mary everything. I shared those memories I had kept inside for 30 years through tears. She cried with me too. She told me she wasn't angry with me, that she understood. But I was still angry with myself. When I turned 60, I decided to visit Hiroshima. Mary came with me. The city had been rebuilt, but the monument standing in the Peace Park reminded us of that day. When I stood in front of the monument, I fell to my knees and cried. 35 years later, my tears finally flowed. That day in Hiroshima, I talked with some elderly Japanese people. They too had witnessed that day. At first, I thought they would be angry when they recognized me, but they weren't. They received me with understanding, and we cried together. That day I realized that the real victims of war were not only those who died, but also those who continued to live. Today I am 80 years old and I have grandchildren. I tell them this story because it must not be forgotten. They need to understand how terrible war is, how precious peace is. That bomb didn't just destroy Hiroshima, it also took a part from our souls.
Bobby Mitchell's story shows that war continues not only on the front lines, but also after returning home. Sometimes being a hero means carrying the heaviest burden. This story reminds us of the real human dramas behind one of history's darkest moments. War may end, but the traces of what is experienced continue for a lifetime. Not forgetting the past is the first step in building the future.